Okay, welcome to the Hampton Bays Civic Association meeting. While we still have people coming in, I'm just going to start with a few notes that will probably be of interest to most of you. I, by the way, am Maria Holtz, Vice President of the Civic. Janice Landis is MIA somewhere in Tennessee. To begin with, this is our debate part one, which is strictly the Southampton trustees. On October 23rd, we will have our second meeting. It's going to start at 6:30 because there'll be a lot of candidates, not just the town board, but the county legislatures and the highway department as well. So certainly we hope we see you all there. Also, a special note is tomorrow there is a town board meeting at 6 p.m. to, they tell me, decide the fate of the hills. So we hope that you will all attend and make your voices heard appropriately. On Thursday at 10 a.m., Town Supervisor Jay Schneiderman submits his budget to the board, and that is an open meeting, and I would think it would be of interest to quite a few of you, so make note of that, Thursday at 10 a.m. Next weekend is our San Gennaro Festival. The Civic will have a booth there, as well as many other people. It's a rather large gathering, and if you've never attended, it's a lot of fun. If you have attended, I'm sure you'll be back to eat and have some more fun. Just to recap our annual fundraiser, we had our ducky race last week, and as Tom said to me, it was a lot of fun. Julie was on the boat. We have, by the way, represented here from the town board, Julie Lofstead. And I did see Stan Glinka, someone. Did anyone else sneak in? No, so we have two town representatives. And thank you for attending. And Julie was on the boat and helped launch the duckies and witness the race. So you would attest it was good fun as well?
Very good fun.
To let you know, our nominating committee chair has been appointed. It is Bonnie Doyle, our Hampton-based secretary. She's in the back waving at everyone. And if you have anyone you would like to nominate to be on the board of the Civic, we're pleased. We're taking nominations, and we're looking for a few good people. Candidates debate, I mentioned, will be October 23rd at 6:30. And Mary, where are you? Oh, do you want to come up and say a couple of words about the CPI SEIS?
Of course. It's all yours.
Hello, my name is Mary Payzan. If any of you don't know, the R Square Development, the developer for CPI, has submitted a supplementary draft environmental impact statement which studies, analyzes the water supply. If anyone doesn't know, there was a lawsuit brought by a group called the Shinnecock Neighbors, and while the judge ultimately held up, ruled mostly in favor of the respondents, the judge did say that the group, the developer, had to go back and study the water. So this draft supplement, there's a lot of initials in this. The CPI DEIS is actually on the town's website. So I went through it, and I'm going to prepare a letter probably stating that the DEIS is not sufficient, it's inadequate, and that the town should not accept it at this time. I don't know if anybody really wants me to go through the rationale, but part of the rationale is that it seems to me that in light of what's happened recently, particularly in Hampton Bays with the water, that the DEIS really has to analyze the water flow, looking at all of Hampton Bay's water district. I mean, water is not like transportation and traffic that you can maybe isolate where the issue arises. So what happens on the east side of the canal with the water is definitely related to what happens on the west side. So it's my feeling anyway that the DEIS should consider the fact that 3 wells are currently closed and that more wells could be closed in the future, either because of contaminants or they're just closed for regular maintenance, and that it has to consider the water service and supply to the entire hamlet. So that's, letter's not done yet. If anybody has any questions on it or wants to look at the SEIS or wants to contact me about it, my email address is my name, which is on the agenda, and I'm at AOL, which I've heard is a testament to my age. Nobody uses AOL. So does anybody have any quick questions? Because I know you want to hear from these guys and really not from me. Okay, I'll turn you back to Maria.
Thank you. Last thing, our meeting last month was a presentation that Mary ran on the Hampton Bays Corridor Strategic Plan. And it was a very successful meeting. And for those of you that did not attend, we want you to know it's available on our website. So please check it out. In terms of tonight, our debate protocol, I'm just going to read so that I don't mess it up, is we're going to start with opening remarks from the candidates, and we'll give them 2 minutes each to make a statement. Just so that the candidates are aware, Mary will be holding time cards to let you know when you have a minute left and when you have 30 seconds left. And that will be true for all questions, not just your opening remarks. After the opening statements, there will be 4 questions that I will pose as a representative of the Civic and Hampton Bays, to which each question will allow a 1.5-minute answer, then a 1.5-minute response from the other side, and a 1.5-minute rebuttal. So that gives you a total of about 5 minutes. After those questions are answered, you will have questions from the audience. And I'd like to remind you, if you haven't filled out a card, Liz has had cards in the front that you're welcome to, and John has cards in the back. So if you just put your hands up, if you have a question, they will give you a card. There will be no standing up and asking questions from the audience. And I think that ends it. I understand that the candidates understand you're going to be giving team answers for the Republicans and the Democrats, so you can decide who's going to speak and answer on which question. Any questions to all of that? Okay, then I'm going to ask everyone to stand, and let's begin with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, does anyone have a coin? See who came carrying money. Thanks. Your coin you call, heads or tails?
Heads.
And that's to go first or second?
Second.
Yeah, that's tails.
Yes, it's tails.
Okay, so you will go first. So whichever one of you wants to start off. This is Don Law. I guess Bruce hasn't come, so if you guys want to shift down a little bit and be comfortable, make yourselves at home.
All right, everybody can hear me? That's better. Okay, let me just get that up there. Anyway, my name is Don Law. I'm a lifelong resident of Hampton Bays. That means a long time, showing my age. After graduating high school, I wound up working for the town as a ocean lifeguard. So I've worked every beach from Flying Point to West Hampton, meeting a lot of nice people, and always had the idea of working the bay, and then going to college. And then I blamed Southampton College for kicking me out, because once I looked at the bay from the top of that hill and seeing the ocean, they didn't kick me out. My thoughts were final then, and I had just gotten married, so it wasn't a very good choice with my wife. But I've been on the bay making a living with finfish, seafood, the shellfish, excuse me, waterfowl guide since 1976 with the town, licensed. Ed's father, I believe, signed my card. I've been married 43 years. I have 3 kids. They grew up here, graduated high school here. I have 4 grandkids, and I just want them to enjoy what I had growing up, and they have been so far. One of the things I've been doing for the last 25 years, with a few side tracks, and we all go through the bumps and the side roads, but a licensed charter boat captain. So that means I take people for hire, and also means they get to see what I see, and I explain to them what I see that they don't see, and they ask the questions. But it's very enjoyable to see people who really come out from areas that we don't live, and they live, that see what we have, and when I explain to them what, where everything is, and why it's there, the bay bottoms, things like that. So.
Thank you.
See, how's that? Is that okay? Okay. Hi, I'm Scott Horowitz, and I would like to first say thank you to the Hampton Bays Civic Association. This Civic Association does a fantastic job hosting all types of forums for various different reasons throughout the town, and I want to say thank you first. Hampton Bays is special to me. I went to school here in Hampton Bays from elementary school right on through to high school. I was a bay constable here. It was my first job working for the town. I worked in the Shinnecock Canal. I was patrolling that day in and day out, keeping people safe and keeping the wakes down, and assisting wherever I could. I did that until I went to the Suffolk County Police Academy, where I worked seasonally for the police department. I worked all year long on different events and different assignments that they had for me while I attended college at Southampton College. I got my bachelor's there in environmental studies. Public service has always been important to me. Some of you may know that I am the founder and chairman of the Hamptons Offshore Invitational, which we hold here in Hampton Bays. And that event has raised over $2 million to support children in our schools and in our community. And it also supports the maritime heritage of our community. I've worked very, very hard as your trustee for the past 2 terms. I'm currently the secretary treasurer and vice chairman to Mr. Warner. I've worked hard on the Ponquag Fishing Pier and on many other projects that had to be dealt with in the best interest of all of our community. I'm going to ask your support in voting for me again, because there's a lot of unfinished business that we started, and some of it right here in the room, including taking care of how the finances are handled for the Board of Trustees and the start to getting a tax line, which is something that I feel is very important to the Board of Trustees. And I look forward to this debate here tonight. Thank you all for coming.
Good evening. My name's Ed Warner Jr. I want to thank the Hampton Bays Civic for hosting this event. Normally, we're on the tail end of the town board and a few other people running for office. We usually get about a half an hour of time. Everybody's looking at the clock, waiting for 9 o'clock to come, and half the people leave. So tonight, we're the front and center, which is a beautiful thing, because I think we have the most important job within the town, protecting your assets, the underwater lands, the shellfish. And we work hard working with the town board and other agencies, the DEC, the Army Corps, and everybody that, basically permits stuff. We do dredging projects, which we're hard after getting another dredging project within the town at Penniman's Creek, working with the village of Co-op. We've been alluded to that the trustees don't work well with other local villages. Well, that's totally false. We're willing to work with anybody to acquire permits for them, work for better water quality. All right, I'm going to speak a little bit about myself. Basically, I'm a Bayman. I grew up in this town. Donnie alluded to working the water. I've done this my whole life. 7 years old, I started working with my grandfather. Now that I'm 58 years old, I know this bay. I know the town like the back of my hand. I know the issues. I deal with the issues regularly as a elected official, as a trustee. It's very important to take these issues on head first. Also, as a resident, I feel very strongly that we support our community and work hard. One of the projects that Scott alluded to is the Ed Warner Memorial Pier, the fishing pier that was destroyed by Sandy. Well, we're hard after getting a permit for that, which we managed to do. And also, I believe the town has put an RFP out and basically hired a contractor to do the project this coming fall. So the residents of the town will be able to recreational fish again. All right, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm glad to be here, and even my sister came to support me. My big sister, or actually she's my little sister. Hope you all enjoyed the weather in the last couple of days, and today was beautiful. I spent some of my time out clamming, fishing on Sunday and Saturday afternoon. Had a wonderful time. I went down, had my picture taken down on K Road today. Saw some people out there paddleboarding and clamming. That's what makes me want to be a trustee. Some of the things I see wrong with the trustees is the lack of communication. Big time, lack of communication. I was talking to Ed at a meeting the other day, and one of the trustees said, oh, we had a meeting with the people around Mecox, where the town attorney was there. I go, Ed, another prime example, lack of communication, lack of communication. He says, oh, I didn't even know that myself. That's true. I'm not lying. It's true. Okay? It's not his fault. I don't know whose fault it is, but it's the board's fault. When you have a board, and when you spell trustee, you spell an I in it. There's no I in trustee. There's 5 people. 5 people are going to make a decision. 5 people have got to get together and work together. Doesn't matter if you're I, D, C, whatever. You got to get together. You got to do it for the environment and do it for the freeholders. Do it for the clams. Do it for the oysters. Thank you very much.
All right, my name is Ron Fisher. I'm from Flanders. I was a past chair of the Flanders Riverside Northampton CAC, past president of the Flanders Riverside Northampton Community Association. So my background's a little bit different. It's in civic advocacy. I really enjoy it. I bring a passion to a lot of projects. While I was president of Franca, we secured over $1 million in grants to help make our community better, focusing on all sorts of projects, bulkhead repairs, water remediation issues. A couple of years ago, I bought a house in a coastal community. I'm about 4 houses from the beach, and every day we walk our dog down there. And 3 years ago, there was a terrapin die-off. We walked down there and found a dead terrapin on the beach. We didn't think anything of it. The next day, we went back and we found 9 dead terrapins on the beach. And it instilled something different in me. I wanted to get to the bottom of it. I wanted to see why that was happening. And I feel like I have a skill set that I can bring to the trustees that will help address these issues like water quality. It's an economic driver in our economy, and I think it's one that requires a lot of attention and a lot of focus. That's what I want to bring as a trustee. Currently, I'm on the Riverhead School Board, and I have a skill set there and experience there advocating, again, for taxpayers, and it's what I enjoy doing. I work really well with others. I'm a great communicator, changed the game in Flanders, Riverside, and Northampton, and I hope that I can do that on the trustee board as well. And one of the things that is exciting for me is to be part of this team with Gary Glanz, Ann Welker, and Bill Pell. The more I learned about the trustees, I found out in their 300-plus year history, they've never had a woman as elected as a trustee, and I think it's time. So I hope you'll consider letting me work with Ann Welker as an elected, with Gary Glanz and Bill Pell to address these issues and more. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name's Ann Welker, running for Southampton Town Trustee. I grew up on the East End, but I'm not considered a true local by some, because I wasn't born in Southampton Hospital. But I have deep roots in the community. Some of you may know my mom, who's here tonight, Mary Welker, who taught at Hampton Bays Senior High School. Some of you may know my dad, Raoul Welker, who was one of the founding members of the Marine Science faculty at Southampton College. I make my living on the water. I'm not a bayman, I'm a water woman. I teach swimming, I teach paddleboarding, I teach ocean safety and ocean swimming. I first became involved with water quality issues because when I went to swim at Big Fresh Pond, I got out of my car and there was a huge sign on the tree stating that there were high bacteria counts and that the beach was closed to swimming. That was so troubling to me. The next summer, I went to Mecox Bay. At Mecox Bay, I got out of the car to paddleboard, and there again is a sign, beach closed because of blue-green algae. That was the tipping point for me. I became involved with water testing with the Surfrider Foundation. We test 50 sites from Montauk to West Hampton, 4 of them in Hampton Bays, Ponquag, Tiana Bay Marine Park, Old Ponquag Bridge, and Mashut. This week, there were over 6 sites in western Southampton town with alarmingly high bacteria counts. That's unacceptable. We need to work together to make a difference. We need, Mother Nature doesn't have a party. She needs to hear our voices.
Good evening. My name is Gary Glantz, and I'm going to cut mine short. For 20 generations, our town has enjoyed healthy bays with abundant fish and shellfish. But in 2017, our bays are broken. Our lakes and ponds are toxic. Our incumbent trustees are suffering from a communication breakdown. And our money, your money, is being wasted. But there's good news. We'll have $11 million in 2017 to spend on water quality improvement. We'll have $350 million, your money, perhaps far more, to be spent over the coming decades for water quality improvement. But our boards of trustees have been making bad choices. They have chosen not to spend their limited resources on water quality improvement projects, but rather have been fighting with the villages, losing lawsuit after lawsuit, whose decisions have eliminated much of the power and the authority that they sought to maintain. This election is critical. We need, all of us need to help restore the bays so that our children, our grandchildren, and 20 generations beyond are blessed with healthy bays teeming with life. When you elect Bill Pell, Gary Glantz, Ron Fisher, and Ann Welker, we will do 3 things. We will become the conscience of the town, county, and state government, and we will insist that the money they spend, the hundreds of millions of dollars spent on your behalf, is done in a fair, equitable, and expedient manner. We will propose our own smart and effective water quality projects, and we will fight to maintain our historic beach rights in a thoughtful and strategic way that does not diminish town trustee authority.
Thank you. There are no rebuttals to the opening statement.
A lot of that needs to be rebutted.
You will get your chance. Thank you. All right, as to the first question from the Civic Committee, we'd like to know your position on vehicular ocean beach access. You get a minute and a half for that, then they get a minute. Yeah.
Historically, the trustees have preserved and maintained beach access for vehicles. There is a parking area or a 24-hour beach access in the village. which is on our easement, but in the village, so we have no regulatory authority over there to basically maintain or regulate any of the activities that went on in the village. Some of them were questionable. We're looking possibly to expand the activity to the western part of Southampton town, somewheres by Hot Dog Beach, but that's a long, drawn-out process. The beach has to be wide enough. We have to get a take permit from the Fish and Wildlife. So there's many hurdles that have to be gone through before we even contend opening or possibly opening this area. So I know Scott would like to.
Yeah, it's a very small area that Ed is speaking about at Triton. I think there was $20 million of taxpayer money spent down in that area, and there really should be a resource that's enjoyed by everybody in the township. 4x4 beach driving is heavily regulated right now in the areas that we do have regulatory authority. We don't all of a sudden decide that we're going to start lawsuits with the villages. We have a lot of communication and collaboration to try and come to reasonable decisions and reasonable solutions to defend people's access and the resources. But sometimes it doesn't work, and you have to let the lawyers and the courts intercede.
Thank you. Rebuttal, minute and a half.
I won't use a whole minute and a half. I agree with what Mr. Warner said. Most of the board is uniform on that thought on access to the beach with trucks and cars.
Yeah, I would just add that I spent a good bit of my time in Eastern Shore of Maryland, and there is no access to the beaches. There is no access to the bay. I live 1,000 feet from the water, and I have to drive 5 miles to get access. So it's a critically important right that we need to maintain.
But there also has to be balance with driving on the beach. So we need this complicated situation, and we need to be careful when we make the decisions.
All right, thank you. Any rebuttal to that? You get a minute and a half.
I just want to broaden everybody's perspective on beach driving. It's not only takes place on the barrier beach, the ocean beach, it also takes place on the bay beaches, and there is a 24-hour beach access on the Peconic Bay. The trustees do not have they actually own, it's a Peconic Beach Road, not an easement like we have on the beach, so we have a lot more authority over there. Having an easement can be sometimes problematic. So whatever we do will be vetted very carefully. You want to say something?
Actually, I was down at the beach today, a dune road taking a ride from Quogue Village jurisdiction back to Ponquag, and I checked the beaches out myself, and it's very important. Number one, my dad belonged to the Long Island Beach Buggy Association. Now, those guys rode everywhere on those beaches at any time, but then that was back in the day. And of course, I sat in the back of the Jeep, enjoying it. So it's very dear to me to keep these beaches open at the right times. Of course, like you don't want to be on it when Sandy was riding around. Believe me, we got to go on there later. But it's important to keep them open. It's important to keep it safe, and yeah, exactly. And make everybody happy. It's not always the easiest thing to do.
Okay, anything this side wants to say in rebuttal or add? We're all good. Anything else you guys want to say?
No, it's just that, the reality is that the Federal Endangered Species Act kind of takes over a lot of our beaches in the summertime. The trustees oversee the piping plover program and the lease turn program, where we maintain the balance between the maximum amount of public access and the ability to have a thriving population of piping plovers. We do that in the interest of the landowners and all the other entities that offer permits on that easement now on that outer beach. And we get a lot of birds because there's a lot of activity that takes place at county parklands where they have extensive 4x4 truck on their property in addition to the towns. So that leaves the trustee easement and private property where the birds have to be looked after. And we do that. We do that to the best of our ability. The reports that we have show that we've done a very good job for protecting the lease turns and the piping plovers, and at the same time, we shut down driving, 4x4 driving in a lot of the areas, and we have to section off areas even where people can walk. So we have done the best that we possibly could to work within the guidelines of the federal government, keep public access open, and protect our beaches. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is, do you support a separate tax line for the trustees?
That's us.
Yeah, you go first.
You're going first.
I do. I support a separate tax line for the trustees. I think that it's important that the trustees have an opportunity to work with their own budget in a way that allows them to collect it directly from the citizens, as long as it doesn't raise taxes for the rest of Southampton, as long as the taxes that are currently collected for the town of Southampton are lowered at the rate that they're increased for the trustees. I think that's important. The trustees regularly go to the town board for additional funding for litigation and lawsuits, things like that. And I think having their own tax line on our tax bills would be a good thing.
We get to do that? You get to do that. Okay. Tax line. A tax line is one of the most important things, in my view, to the people of the town of Southampton. The trustees need to be able to get the revenue necessary so that they can continue to protect public access and take care of the environment and be able to just run operations. We have very, very few guys just to take care of the buoys out there in the bay and various different projects. The reality is that we set the stage to be successful in a tax line, because when you have a tax line and you're handling taxpayers' money, you need to have a very good system of accountability. And I talked about, in prior times that I was here, something called the Comptroller's Agreement. It was an agreement that we put together where we use the same comptroller that the town board utilizes. And this protects the trustees, because we had a lawsuit where they were trying to defund and take the money away from the trustees, and that would have been the worst thing ever for the people of this town. We needed a way to survive. Well, we won that lawsuit. And in addition, we became stronger, okay? Tax line's very important. It gives us a good system of accountability, and it takes what you need to get out of the trustees, and that is the politics. You need the revenue to come straight in to the trustees so that they can operate and defend and protect whatever it is that needs to be done.
Rebuttal, minute and a half.
I'd like to say one thing further. Sometimes the town trustees' agenda and sometimes the town board's agenda are very much different. And asking them for funding a lawsuit where they might not see that they want to could be problematic. When we have our own tax line, we will be totally accountable for taking care of it and maintaining it and what we do with it. We will be totally accountable to everybody in the town that votes for us.
Yeah, these things that we're involved in lawsuits are not just for the trustees. They're for everybody in the town of Southampton. Public access and the resources are for everybody in the town of Southampton. Okay, so it's very, very important that it comes straight into the trustees. Our board was the board that passed the first public budget in 375 years for the Board of Trustees, and we have continually communicated to each other, put down different projects and ideas, and set a budget. Okay, so we have come a long way with the modernization of the trustees so that we can continue to protect and defend everything that needs to be protected for the people of the town of Southampton. The town trustees is not a club, folks. It is not a hobby. It's not a little thing that you want to do. Being a trustee is serious business. It is one of the most important jobs that there is in the town. You have to defend, you have to be respectful, and you have to be able to go out and educate people and educate other elected officials. And the more the other elected officials are educated on the importance of the trustees, the better off we're all going to be.
Thank you. Any comments? Okay, then, third question. What can the trustees do within their legislated guidelines to help improve the health of our bays? Your side first.
First off, we run a pump out program within the town. Probably to date, we've taken out about 1.5 million gallons of effluent. It's at no cost to the taxpayer resident of the town. I think it's a wonderful program. We're in the process of receiving, I believe, 2 new boats this year and 1 next year. It's a great program. As I say, it makes sure that people do not do the wrong thing with their, effluent in a boat. Well, I'll let Scott answer some of this.
Yeah, we also work on various projects because part of our responsibility is assigned an area where we do permitting. And we're constantly working on this permitting where we're not allowing pressure treated or materials that can bioaccumulate into the system and create problems. We're always mandating buffers. We're always educating people on what the importance is with buffers. I personally sat on the town conservation board for 4 years. The trustees and water quality, it doesn't come from activities of the trustees. It comes from activities in the upland. So we are always advocating the other boards that have the authority and the jurisdiction to upgrade their septic systems and do smart land management projects that are not going to be polluting our bays and our shellfish and our waterways. So we are advocating to them. That's their jurisdiction. We stay in our jurisdiction. There has to be respect for the framework of this town. Don?
Yeah, one of the things that I always think about is, okay, that was,
Is there anything you want to say in rebuttal?
Can I say a few things? Yes, we have the pump out boats, like Ed said, and we're doing the permits, but one of the other problems I see is after you get a permit, we make you put a buffer in. You get the buffer, 2 years go down the road, you take the buffer out, you put grass up to the bulkhead, you fertilize it, it rains, it goes in the water, your landscaper comes down, spreads fertilizer, goes right alongside the bulkhead, half of it goes in the water on that one line. That's one of the troubles. We have to step up afterwards, go back and check, okay? That's one of the things. Other things is there's a lot of people do stuff illegal. I mean, I can name 6 or 7 docks. We brought it up and it just sits there. It's in, I don't even know where it is. It's sitting there. We put it over to code enforcement. We give it to the town attorney and it's sitting there. It's, again, communication. We have to push it. We have to communicate. And we have to communicate with the villages. So the different ponds help clean them up. The road run water, we have to, show where there's problems with that. We have to work with the highway department with the drainage near the end of the roads, where stuff goes down into the road. They have done a lot with that, but there's still a lot more to do.
Okay, Don, you get your minute and a half.
oh, good. Well, a lot of Billy was saying was what I was going to talk about was the harmful stuff that's upland that is coming back. Scott mentions it all the time, and the most important thing is educate, educate, and educate. I have a lot of people in our marina. Scott knows that they don't live here. They live in the city and stuff, and we tell them, certain things. Over there was the house, it got rebuilt. Things have changed, and they want to cut down certain things. Well, you can't do that. It's just telling people and educating people. The runoffs, the new roads, the fertilizers is huge. Because I remember going down Quad Canal at low tide and looking at these bulkheads with PVC pipes of stuff coming out of whatever went in their lawn, whatever came out of their pool that they didn't want for the winter. So, and they started up again. So all that stuff needed to be, I'm not going to say turn the people in, but educate and just try to help the trustees. You make they got the number, you make the phone call, and it's just education is the most important thing, I believe.
Thank you. Yeah, you have a minute and a half.
Oh, great. So I think that the issue is not what legislative authority we may have. We are entering a new era in which the state is offering to put in $2.5 billion. Our town will have $350 million or $500 million over the coming decades. And I believe that this board needs to advocate strongly for water quality improvements. And we need to get out in front of this money. And we need to be sure that this money is spent correctly and that it's not wasted and that it's not allocated to institutions that spend far too much in overhead. And so I think the role of the board needs to change, and it's a period of time where there's tremendous awareness, and if we're not to be left behind, we need to get out in front of this whole issue and advocate with the state, advocate with the county, advocate with the town, advocate with the CPF fund.
Scott?
Just in rebuttal to that, I think he's alluding to the CPF 20, where 20% of the CPF funds can be up for grabs for water quality projects. We have requested, and we have made it very clear, that some of that needs to be directed by the Board of Trustees. That's not in our authority, that's the town board's authority. We do have communication with the town board. We've had communication with Assemblyman Fred Thiel, who was the godfather of the CPF. A lot of that doesn't fall within the guise of the Board of Trustees, and we have asked for a percentage of that money. Septic systems are very important to be upgraded and advocating for these, but there are a lot of other things. An example is a situation like Mecox Bay. Mecox Bay needs a management plan put together because Mecox Bay affects more than just the outer beach. It affects every single homeowner that lives around that area in Watermill, and it also has a great effect on the farmers. Farmers have issues with their crops because of Mecox Bay. It's a classic example where you have harmful algal blooms, you have shellfish that are under severe stress because of low salinity levels and poor water quality. Shellfish that supports recreation and the salt of our community, our bayment. It's a classic example. We've asked them for assistance in putting together a management plan for Mecox and a sustainable funding source. This is an important waterway for everybody in the town of Southampton. So we do advocate for smart projects.
Thank you. Yes, Billy, go ahead.
That's one more thing what Scott just said about the Mecox plan. I think Fred Havmeyer's over there. I think when he was on a board, how many years ago were we trying to do a plan? And we still have not done a plan. Again, lack of communication. That plan should have been put in 2 years ago.
Thank you.
How would we have a sustainable plan without a sustainable funding source? You need to have a sustainable funding source. Sorry.
Are we done? Okay, last question from the Civic. What is your position on the hardening of beach structures? You're up first.
That's a no-brainer. They're bad. Hardened beach structures bad. I just, like Eric Schultz said one time, how come if you go up to Flanders and put a pole in, the DEC gives you a ticket? You go down to the village, you're going to put a bulkhead right across the beach. I don't understand that, why the DEC let them do it. Prime example of bulkheads along the water, you can go down to, excuse me, Flying Point to Mecox. That's one of the trouble with Mecox, with the beach club there. They don't have a bulkhead, so they get washed out. Once that sand is gone in front of from the bulkhead, the water comes up and hits it. It's just like a bowling alley. It takes whatever's in its way down drift, and it eats away at the end of the bulkhead where there's no bulkhead, and so that landowner suffers big time.
So yeah, I think we're all against hardened beach structures. At least I am. I'm not sure, and I'm not sure it's within the jurisdiction of the trustees. And I think there's probably been a court case that has decided that unfavorably. And so I'm not sure it's the right question. I think the question is what are we going to do about the bays? What are we going to do about the toxic levels of stuff in our ponds and our lakes? Yep. And time.
All right, comments, rebuttals?
I believe you alluded to that our lawsuits that we lost were frivolous lawsuits, but we were fighting for everybody in this room and all the public to maintain our easement. And we did lose a court case in East Quogue, and it's a shame. And also, as was spoken about in the village of Southampton, we do not have regulatory authority over the structures that are there. Right now, the beaches are okay, but if you get a Sandy, an Irene, or maybe even an Irma or a Jose that comes along, those beaches are not going to look like they do today. They're going to be washed away, and all those hardening structures that have been placed there over the decades are going to be exposed. They're going to be broken up. And again, our lovely DEC, which allowed them to replace these structures, to build them higher, to build them stronger, is going to be accountable. You know, we tried hard with our court cases, talking to the village, but we do not have regulatory authority over hardening structures on the Barrier Beach. But we do have regulatory authority over hardening structures within the Bay Beaches.
We had time? Anything you want to say?
Just, you know, we are the recipients of poor land decisions made in the upland. The hardened structures on the beach, the erosion, all the pollution that's entered into our ponds, they all came from the upland, and we're dealing with it as best as we possibly can. Obviously, people want to protect their property.
Okay, rebuttal.
I just want to respond to Ed's comment about frivolous lawsuits, and I never said the lawsuits were frivolous. I only said that they were expensive and perhaps misguided. There's no question that the trustees have been in the right in all of these issues. It's just, are you wise to spend the money to go after them in a lawsuit, and when do you quit?
Any rebuttal?
I mean, you know, really, we have counsel. We have very, very competent counsel. Okay, we don't just go off cavalierly deciding that we're going to engage in these things. All right, a lot of things lead up to that where we try and find sensible resolutions, but sometimes that's not possible. But these are all things that there's communication between the trustees and the town attorneys and the town boards and the supervisors and all the special counsels in defense of what has existed prior to the formation of the country. Okay? Things like public access rights, things like sensible regulation to protect everybody here in this room and the beaches. And what the judges do and the lawyers do, that's out of our control. They have to do the best that they can. Okay? It's about standing for something and doing the best you can. There's many things that we take on that we don't end up in lawsuits because we find resolutions that make sense for everybody. That's what we try and do first and foremost. But when you have to, you have to.
No, I just agree. I do agree with Scott, of course. And it's not that if you give into the lawsuit or you say, well, we're going to cave, then you start to lose your power as a trustee, and you're admitting that you did something wrong in the first place. So, like, you try to work it out, first of all. You just don't go in there with, guns blazing. You work it out, and you see what the problem is, and that's why you have these attorneys and your lawyers. And all right.
And if I could just rebut, you say you go into lawsuits to protect your power, but you've lost the power by the direct result of the lawsuits. And so I'm just suggesting that they may have been misguided. You may have made a mistake in pursuing these lawsuits to the loss of the power of the trustees.
Up until that point, we were pretty good winning all the court battles. I guess it's a change in philosophy of the courts.
I believe that lawsuit was won the first time, and then it was overturned. And that started long before I was on the board. And sometimes you end up having to deal with things. You inherit these lawsuits, just like you inherit all the pollution in the ponds and the lakes and the bay and everything else. We've inherited this, and we're trying to deal with it as best as we possibly can. Okay? We're trying to protect your assets, your resources, your public access to the beaches, and we're trying to protect your money as best as we possibly can. We know everybody works hard for it. We're trying to make it so you can enjoy yourself clamming, fishing, whatever it is that you want to do going to the beach. I believe the trustee board, most important board in the town. It's important that we work together. We try and have great relationship with the town board. Everybody has to respect each other's jurisdictions. The trustees hold that easement on that outer beach for everybody, not the town board. and not the village boards or mayors. If somebody's trying to block an easement in the village, they have to come to the town trustees to deal with that. It's very important. It's not a game.
Thank you. At this point, I'm going to take questions from the audience, and I'd like to remind you that if you have a question, just put your hand up and John will get you a card and give it to Liz. All right, first question. What is your solution to the Mecox Bay stabilization? I don't know which side wants to go first.
The Mecox, well, first off, let me state something for the record. There is a bulkhead at the Mecox cut. Well, it was an upland retaining wall, which was given by the building department. The trustees were not in favor of granting it, and I believe we're on record as saying if it's put in there, it's going to cause an adverse effect to the environment, which it has. You can see after Sandy and Irene, it was a terrible, project, and it failed miserably. It fell over, and then they had to re-shore it up and cover it with sand. One of the problems, basically, that I see with that is that going forward, once you do something like that, then it sets a precedent along the beach. And unfortunately, in the villages, we do not have regulatory authority. At this point, unfortunately, each one of the villages deem their powers, to regulate the structures of their own through the building and the CHAR program in the state. So it's, like I say, it's out of our jurisdiction.
Got 30 seconds left. The trustees are working on trying to find a management plan that makes sense for everybody, that takes into consideration Mecox as an ecosystem. I kind of alluded to this earlier, issues with the farmers. Trustee Pell made a mention that we had a meeting. Yeah, you know what? Some of the constituents there called me up and wanted to go to town hall and have a conversation with me because they had some concerns about what was going on at their homes, in their basement, in their cesspools at Mecox. So I had a meeting with them.
Okay, to read the question one more time. What is your solution to the Mecox Bay stabilization?
I agree with Ed, and also we were very close in making a plan a few years ago. It's very basic plan, salinity, height, weather, temperature of the water. Okay, and also know the trustees got afraid of a couple lawsuits up and down the beach that if we open it or close it, money got involved on the beach. People gave a lot of money, don't open it, don't close it, do this, do that, okay? But we lost sight of what we were doing, okay? We had excuses, pushing the blame to someone else, but the bottom thing is the blame is us, the 5 trustees, that we did not do something sooner. It's just like down in Texas, okay, with those dikes. They should have planned better, fixed those dikes. They did not. We have the same thing. The place is flooding over. The farmers are flooding out. There's water in people's lawns. The septic is there. I went down there. I took pictures of algae coming from in channel. I sent it to Chris Goebel. I sent it to our environmental analyst. I sent it to Ed Warner to notify him so he can notify the other trustees of it. Okay? We have to do something. We have to do something for the people. We have to do something mainly for Mecox itself.
You have to rebut that? Yeah. All right, just to kind of rebut that a little bit. It's not the trustees' fault. The trustee board has to work with the Department of Environmental Conservation at this point in time. And at this point in time, the Department of Environmental Conservation has not renewed the trustees' permit to engage in these activities, okay? So every time we want to make an opening, we have to go to the DEC and get clearance to make that opening. We have to have the town attorney's office provide substantial documentation about people's hardships that live in that community, including the farmers, including the baymen, residential septic systems that are poisoning Mecox Bay at the time of very high level, like right now, okay? Yes, we need to take into consideration all of those factors and boil it down into a plan. And we need to be able to fund that plan so that it works for everybody forever, okay? We have to take care of this. Problem's not going to go away. But it is not the trustees' fault. It is a very large project, very large problem, and it really requires everybody, the town board, the state, DEC, and everybody that can provide us with resources and assistance to help make this ecosystem better. To place the responsibility and blame this 5-member board sitting here with limited budget from enterprise revenue is irresponsible. We've done everything we could. We've worked with the DEC. They have to come to the table and help the community and help the citizens of Southampton Town. They need to communicate and collaborate with us.
The one thing, though, that can be done and should be done is that when that cut is opened, it should be done in a way that takes into account the tide, the wind, and storms that are coming, so that when it's opened, it flows, and it doesn't close within a day or so.
It's back to communication again. It's easy to blame someone else, but you voted us in the office to take care of the problem. We have to take care of the problem. And we're not doing a very good job at it. We're trying. Yes, we don't have enough money. Yes. There's 1,000 excuses, but there's no excuse for not getting the job done. The previous board never had any problems. I learned how to take care of Cox when I took care of it. Fred Havermeyer did a beautiful job. We never had any of these problems when he had it. I took over, and Bruce Stafford took it over after me with Scott, and what do we got now? You're going to listen to the DEC? Well, we have a state act, I think it's 19-something or 1876 that says that we can open it any time. Are you afraid of the DEC, or are you going to take care of it for the people? Sometimes you got to stand up and do the job.
All right, thank you. Any rebuttal?
If it was all that easy, it would be open, running as we talk. But unfortunately, we have plovers. We have a beach season with hundreds and thousands of people over there swimming. We open the cut up, it becomes a liability for the town. We have to manage it in a way that it becomes a holistic approach, not just for the duration of the summer or the fall or spring. When we open it, it has to be open long enough for a good flushing, in and out. Without a good flushing, the salinity doesn't go up, the shellfish die, we have blue-green algae problems. So looking at it from a holistic approach, and with funding, I think it's something that can be accomplished. I'm going to the DEC on Friday to have a meeting with the DEC and discuss this whole issue. Sometimes when they sit in their tower up there and talk it, they don't see what's going on in the environment. Being a bayman and spending, thousands of days in Mecox, I can attest it's not something that we can just put in a textbook and write and say it's going to happen. I've seen 40,000 cubic yards of material be stockpiled there. One storm totally wash it out. I've seen that bay, so it was so high that it was up on the watermill, almost on the road in Watermill. I've seen it so low in there where people thought everything was going to die. The duck hunters were complaining it was too low. It's not something that you pick up a textbook and just manage. There's a lot of parameters: salinity, bay height, wind, currents, storms. And then dealing.
And we're doing this under threat of this time.
Any comment?
I agree with Ed, but it still has to be done. We got to do it more carefully, and again, get the job done. And now you're looking like December 1st, that opens up for the bayment. Should we relook at that? Or the algae that hasn't been flushed, or the oysters and clams in there? That's another thing we have to look at. Should it be open? Should we have it tested? And there's a lot of livelihood. People make their money in the wintertime out of that place.
All right, next question from the audience. What are your plans to combat brown or red tides? In what time frame will they be implemented? And how long for them to be effective? Lastly, how will they be paid for? You have a minute and a half.
We've taken on a very ambitious program, the Shinnecock Bay Restoration, with Stony Brook University and Chris Gobler. Almost $3.5 million was put up by the college through a grant to help eradicate or manage the brown tide. We work with Cornell Carpet Extension to do shellfish reseeding in Murch's Bay, building solar flupsies, educating people as far as oysters and stuff like that, and shellfish, how they clean the waters. I think, it's another holistic approach.
Yeah, we work towards that with every application that we work on. Appropriate buffers and appropriate material. Advocacy for upgraded septic systems. Obviously, septic systems are outside of the jurisdiction of the trustees, but in conversations relative to working on projects where we're brought in officially, obviously we're looking for them to do that. The time frame that we would see benefits, I mean, there's so much of a problem that we're dealing with right now. I'm hopefully that implementation of these things, we could see a benefit in our lifetimes, I would hope. I don't think you're going to see it like turning a switch. I think it's a gradual sort of a thing that we're going to have to phase in as quickly as we can, and I think the benefits will take some time to see. The environment is very resilient. Eelgrass is growing back very nicely, and I think that things will be good.
All right, when the CPF referendum went through last year, it allowed 20% of the CPF money to go towards water quality improvement projects, and with that came a really comprehensive water quality improvement plan. There's a remediation component, there's a reduction component, and we have a three-pronged approach that we think will really help. One is using the money to help clean out those storm basins with the highway department, the catch basins on the dead-end roads and roads all over the town of Southampton. That catches the first half inch of rainwater and runoff and gets that out of the bays almost immediately. Another is to expand on the Spat on Shell program and get nature working better in the bays, so increasing the amount of shellfish that cleans the bays daily, oysters, clams, things like that. And the third component is cluster systems, which are these new technology of improving septic systems in high-density neighborhoods. It's a little bit more comprehensive than just replacing one septic system at a time and upgrading it, but it would take entire waterfront communities off of the septic system. And it's this cluster system. The technology is available. It's being used in the U.S. and other areas, and I think it's time that we start really using that in the town of Southampton. I think it's the responsibility of the trustees to advocate for these water quality improvement projects, and that's the kind of trustees we want to be. We want to be addressing the water quality issues in a timely manner, and we want to be at the front of requesting that CPF money for these projects. Thank you.
Buttle?
If I could just quickly add that these cluster systems are not new. These are proven technologies that have been used for decades, and in many parts of the country they're being used.
Rebuttal?
One project I'd like to see done with the CPF 20 would be dredging projects all over the town. As we know, water flow gets diminished when the creeks and harbors get shallower. There's several projects that I could see right off the get-go. Smiths Creek, Weesa Creek, and some of the other creeks and harbors in western Shinnecock Bay where the water quality is degraded. CPF 20 could be used to purchase property where deposition material could be placed on, which is a real holdup on all these dredging projects. Many of the sites do not have deposition sites, so they just languish around and never get dredged. So with this money, we could facilitate use of these properties.
Yeah, septic systems are not in our jurisdiction. Septic systems are great, but there are other things. I agree. Dredging is very important. CPF funds purchasing properties, it does not allow us to dewater dredge spoils there, and that's a negative for the environment at the end of the day. It would be better to be held in the name of the trustees.
One of the things I did talk about a few years ago is exactly what Ed said, is some of these bays and these creeks are just dead. They're dead. There's no water getting in there. It could be 90 degrees and up to 88 degrees or something. But then the bays are in their 68 to 72 degrees. These bays, the spoilage, as Ed related to, is it's got to sit for a certain time. I don't know the exact time, but I have watched these piles.
Yes, you do.
I just want to say that the problem with the algae isn't something that's happened yesterday or the day before. It's been ongoing for the past 20 or 30 years, since the early 80s. We're not going to be able to solve it overnight, and it's going to take all of us working together, and it's probably not going to happen in the speed that you as an individual want it to happen, unless you as an individual make a decision to not put fertilizer on your lawn, to ask your landscaper not to use pesticides, because with runoff, all that does is go directly into our bays and ponds.
Yeah, and I would like to make a comment about the reliance on institutions to solve our problems, because many of our institutions, universities and such, take a large percentage of the funds available to them in overhead. And if you look on their websites, it's somewhere between 30 and 70% of the cost of a project that goes into overhead. And so a $3.5 million project run through Cornell or Stony Brook may actually be $1 million project actually going into the bays. And so I think as trustees we need to look for homegrown solutions that will put 100% of the monies that we receive from CPF funds and make sure that it stays in Southampton Town and make sure that it stays in Southampton waters.
All right, I'm going to interject a question which none of you have mentioned. And I know when Hurricane Sandy came, there was a break that happened in the Great South Bay that was dead for 99 years and brought the water back to life almost instantly. And that flushing of the bays has proved to be very effective in many areas, from Cape Cod to Maryland. Why is it no one ever discusses it here?
Which side goes first?
Go ahead.
92, 93, Little Pikes Inlet. There was a break in the Barrier Beach, which is another one of our lawsuits, but I'm not going to go there right now. The water in Quantic Bay had been compromised since 1985, brown tide. 93 was the first year there was no brown tide in Quantic Bay. Flushing, dredging, these are all very easy, to solve. We need money. That's what it comes down to, funding these projects. CPF 20, if we could do that with CPF 20, dredge basically from Murch's Inlet to Shinnecock Inlet, the intercoastal, which used to get dredged regularly by Suffolk County because they had two very large dredges, which worked 365 days a year. That's why a lot of the creeks and harbors can be accessed with boats now. And that almost is a double-edged sword, because when you dredge the creeks and harbors up, you put deposition on the beach, and people build houses. More people come, more pollution. So it's a double-edged sword. But I think the key to good water quality and an easier and probably one of the quickest solutions to be able to be seen is dredging.
Any comments?
I agree with that. On that, dredging and opening it up, everyone would love to see another inlet breakthrough, but it's not going to happen. Or a pipe going through underneath the dune somewhere, but it's never going to happen. So the best thing to do is, the quickest is, like Ed said, dredge.
Yeah, I've often thought that we should reverse the flow of the Shinnecock Canal. If you know the history of it, it was put in so that the stagnant waters of Shinnecock Bay would be flushed with the purer waters from Peconic Bay. We have the exact reversal now. We have ocean waters that could flow in from Shinnecock into the interior depths of Great Peconic Bay, and I think that's probably a faster, cheaper solution than dredging and inlets and such.
All right, let's get back to the next question from the audience. Do you want to?
We do. We sat here in a forum relative to this similar discussion on the Shinnecock Canal. We sat here with the engineer from Suffolk County. Substantial 7-8 knot current runs through Shinnecock Canal. If you reverse it, it would cause, according to the engineer, and what I believe is a severe scouring and a severe erosion problem. It would be virtually impossible to be maneuvering any of the boats. You got a lot of infrastructure there. You have a lot of marinas. Things just aren't as simple as they appear. There's a lot of dynamics that have to come into play to be successful with any of that. Mecox Bay, we just spent 20 minutes talking about Mecox Bay. We go to meetings and we're always under a threat of a lawsuit there at Mecox Bay. Here is an opening for the purpose of water quality that's been going on for centuries, and we're still trying to get the dynamics right on that and get everybody around the table on something that has to happen. So now when you're talking about new breaks and new things and new dynamics with all these different homes out there on the bay, it's very, very, very difficult to achieve something like that in reality. Sometimes things in theory seem like a great idea, but when you actually try and implement them into reality, there's a lot more factors that have to come into play. And we did have substantial conversations relative to the Shinnecock Canal. Peconic, with bunker kills all the way up into Flanders, all the way up into Reeves Bay. I mean, it's just not that easy to be leaving things open and reversing flow for a long period of time without having some adverse effect.
All right, next question from the audience. What would you do to control road runoff? I'm going to let you go first.
As I started to mention in my opening statement, they're catch basins, which are basically drains along the sides of the road. And they've been clogged up basically with sediment and debris. So when you water your lawn or when it rains, the water comes off your lawn, goes down the road, and because these catch basins are full, it's not the water just goes right down into the bay. If we were to be able to clean out, to work with the highway department to be able to clean out those catch basins, there are about 3,000 of them in the town of Southampton, and between 400 and 600 of them are cleaned out annually. If we worked with the highway department to be able to clean them out, that would make a difference.
There's probably more than 3,000. We have to do a survey of where we need them the most, and the highway department, they have a truck that runs full time, that cleans them out every day. They did our neighborhood. They skipped a couple, but the highway department's working on that.
Yeah, as I understand, I spoke with Alex Greger in the highway department, and he told me that they were prioritizing the traffic issues, drains. And so if a drain floods the street and it causes a traffic problem and with a danger to humans, they're not prioritizing the waterways.
First time I dealt with the stormwater runoff, I was not even a trustee. It was back in the late 70s, early 80s. It was at Fish Cove and Paynes Creek. These are two harbors that are prolific shellfish growing areas. They had been closed because of runoff. The town took on a very ambitious project of putting these catch basins in, which worked very well because within a year the shellfish areas were open again and we were allowed to shellfish back in there. The water quality has much reversed itself. When I became a trustee, I worked with Walter Bundy to basically go throughout the whole entire town where the best shellfish growing areas are, where the nurseries for the alewives are, and all the other fish that spawn in the town waters, showing him these areas so that we could map out an area to make sure that the runoff was mitigated so no pollution would get in there. Subsequently, there were probably 3,000 plus of these storm water catch basins that have been installed. They need to be have maintenance done on them. Without maintenance done on them, basically they accumulate everything that runs into them, and they become festering with asbestos from brakes, petrochemicals, and other stuff. They need to be taken, cleaned, and maintained. It's very important, and it's a very hard job because Alex has a limited budget. And I've sat with him when he first became a trustee, and I also a superintendent of highway, and I sat with Billy Masterson to recognize the most important areas within the town, to show him where the...
Any rebuttal? Anything you want to say?
No.
Okay.
Sure, I would just like to go along with what Ed has to say. On my road, there are 10 or 12 catch basins, and it runs right into North Sea Harbor. And 3 or 4 of them are completely full, and most of them have 2 or 3 inches of water in them at most, and maybe 1 or 2 has 30 inches of water.
Can I make one comment? I'm not throwing Alex under the bus because there are village roads that have to be maintained. It's not only Southampton, it's a whole entire township of Southampton.
All right, next
Is it okay if I
question.
add one thing?
I'm going to move on if you don't mind. Do you have any thoughts on how the newly accessible CPF fund should be used to enhance water quality? And I'll let you go first.
Well, everything we've been discussing so far, the dredging, well, the septics, I know other agencies are working on that, so something we're looking at ourselves. But I just want to let everyone know that I am running for trustee. I'm not on the board now, and it's going to the meetings. It's not easy to not listen to the troubles and not listen to the issues and the facts. But the money seems to be, I hate this, in everything. You know, without that funding and without the money to help out these programs, and especially the needs, we're educated enough to know that everything that relies on help, we need the money. So I'd like to.
Once again, I'm just going to reiterate, the question was, how would you use the money of the newly accessible CPF fund?
I mean, I think water quality projects like we outlined on a MECOX plan, dredging, eelgrass restoration, seeds, clam seeds, things like that. Good water quality projects. I think that dredging and getting, plans for Sag Pond and for MECOX Pond, I mean, these are important things to take care of. I know that there's going to be a lot of pressure on it for septic systems, as there should be. But there also needs to be some left for the trustees to have conversations on and figure out what makes sense to do in that direction.
Yes, we have a proposal for a spat on shell program where we would spend $4 million of CPF water quality funds over the next 5 years, and we would introduce perhaps 400 or 500 million oysters into our local town waters. I'm familiar with a University of Maryland program that's run out of Horn Point, and they grow and place 1 billion oysters on an annual basis. They've been doing this for 20 years, and I've noticed that the Chesapeake Bay, over those 10 years that I've seen it, has measurably improved. The water quality has improved. And if you were to take 1 billion oysters and put them into Shinnecock Bay, and you had a 50% die-off, which means you had 500 million oysters in Shinnecock Bay, they would purify that water once daily. And so those are the types of programs and the scale that we need to accomplish water quality improvement in Southampton Town.
They would filter the water. They might not purify it. That's a tall order because you have water that comes all the way from Brookhaven, all the way from Southold. We have water has no boundaries. So doing a project, putting 1 billion oysters, I applaud that effort. As a bayman, I would encourage it, and I would work wholeheartedly doing it. I mean, we do the Common Garden SPAT program at Tiana. We encourage the Cornell to build a solar upweller. We work with Conscience Point Oyster Company, growing oysters and seeding the bays. So, and working with Cornell and seeding with oysters and scallops. So I would applaud that effort. I mean, I've done shellfish transplants from Oyster Bay in Montauk to reseed MECOX Bay because all the oysters died in there when we had like 16 inches of rain at one time. So, I think it's a good, worthy effort.
Any comment?
Yeah, I've been involved in growing oysters, and as I said, I was maybe I didn't have a chance to. I was the co-founder of the Conscience Point Shellfish Hatchery, and we have raised 1 million oysters and 500,000 clams over the past 5 years. But it's just the scale that's all out of whack. We have been decimating our bays, and we've been taking our oysters and our shellfish for hundreds of years, and we find ourselves in a situation where that we're in, where our bays are dying. And so we need an industrial scale. We need to grow billions of oysters, not millions. 1 billion is 1,000 times 1 million, and we've been dealing in hundreds of thousands and millions of shellfish, and we need to begin to deal in billions.
say?
There are a lot more shellfish in the bay than just oysters.
All right, next question. What do you think is the most pressing single issue facing Southampton, and what specifically will you do to address it next year?
Wow.
Single issue.
Single issue. There's a lot of issues. It's hard to single out an issue. But I will tell you something that's very important to myself is the health of the trustees. I think that the trustee board is a very important board, holding all the bay bottoms, holding that trust out on the ocean beaches, being able to advocate for water quality issues and defend that public access. And I think that if we could accomplish getting that tax line for the Board of Trustees and you know, cementing that funding in so that we could actually act on some of a lot of these things that everybody wants to talk about, and we could cement this in, I think that's something that we could do for the generations, for our children and their children. I think that is imperative for the survival of the trustees, and I think it's imperative for everybody in this town. There's more and more pressure on the outer beach. There's more and more pressure on the bays and on all of our resources, and the board that is put in place in order to protect and maintain and take care of and be the steward of these needs to be bolstered and needs to be strong. And part of that is just by showing the taxpayer that this amount of their tax bill is going to the trustees automatically to protect that. I think that's very important to our community, our children, and the generations.
Preserve and protect the economic engine of the Southampton.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Comment?
Mr. Howard is right on that. It's very important, but it's all good. But if you don't communicate with the other board members and let them know what's going on, you're just fighting a losing battle. Again, there's no I in trustee. It has to be 5. We have to work together. You need 5 trustees who will work together for one cause. And he's right on the cause. He hit the nail on the head, but he has to work as a team, not I.
Working collaboratively, communicating, working within the trustees, working within our town government, but also as individuals working.
And I would say the most important thing is to get ahead and to position the trustees to have a voice for the Community Preservation Fund's water quality improvement. There will be literally hundreds of millions of dollars of your money spent, and this trustee board needs to find a way to influence where that money is spent and how it's spent, and make sure that it is spent effectively and correctly.
Well, as far as communication goes, the Community Preservation Fund, I believe there's a board member, a trustee board member that sits on the pre-committee that was supposed to be initially working on the committee, and we have heard virtually nothing as far as communications back from him. So, being that said, communications does go 2 ways.
Yeah, that's true. Communication is a two-way street. I think everybody knows that. People have to work together, they have to listen, they have to want to listen, they have to have a desire to communicate. I can tell you that I endeavor to communicate with people on a regular basis. I try as best as I possibly can. Civics approach me about coming to them and speaking at their organizations, other elected officials from Congress to the state to other town agencies, okay? I know that everybody on this board tries, but those are two-way streets. You could make phone calls that don't get returned, and and that's unfortunate.
Do I have a moment to rebut here? I would just like to say that there is a 5-member Water Quality Improvement Committee, and I've met with 3 of them already. I've met with John Semler, I've met with Josh Halsey, I've met with Howard Reisman, and I have been advocating for our positions, the positions we've been discussing, and making sure that they, in their second meeting, are going to be bringing these up, and they're going to make sure that that our voice has been heard.
You want to take that? I mean, again, I'm gonna go back to my first point. Number one is there's a framework in this town, and it's important for that framework to be respected. I think that there are times when the trustees need to be consulted officially and respectfully. If we are the recipients of the land use decisions that take place in the upland, and we're going to be guys that are going to be having to deal with it, as they do sometimes ask for our advisory. They need to reach out to us at official capacity so that we can bring what we hear and what we see out there in the environment and what we hear from all our constituents that we speak to on a regular basis. Again, there has to be respect for the authorities and for the jurisdictions of the sitting elected boards and the framework that was in place prior to the formation of the country and its importance. And I think when you start to dilute and diminish that, I think you put the town on very shaky ground. I think that's a mistake. And again, that's their lack of communication, not ours. We are an elected board. We are the oldest elected board in the country. We work very hard and very diligently. I think people should come to our meeting officially and ask us for our advice and what we hear from the public and what we see out there in the environment.
Final comment.
Yeah, what I'm hearing here is that Scott would like folks to come to him, and it seems that he thinks that he deserves respect and that he can just sit back and wait. We've been waiting. We've been waiting since 1985 when the first brown tide has decimated our bays, and we've been waiting and waiting and waiting. It's time to stop waiting. It's time to be active, to reach out, to elect a board that will actively go out and engage with folks, and engage with the state, and engage with the county, engage with the town board, engage with the committee that is going to spend hundreds of millions of your dollars.
Mr. Glanz, that's not totally true at all. Okay. What I'm saying is that I'm requesting that the board as a unit that the board as a whole, I'm sorry, I thought we were back. I'm sorry. That's fine. That's all right, we got confused, it's okay.
I think I'm going to stop the discussion right here. I think we understand your rebuttal, and I think we understand Mr. Glanz's purpose. The next question. What can the town board do better to work with the trustees? I'll toss it to you first.
I've always advocated for a close working relationship with most people that I have relations with. The town board has an agenda that's sometimes a little bit different than the trustees. We have meetings. I've talked to Julie Lofstead. I've talked to Stan Glinka. I've talked to Christine Scalara. I've had a conversation with Jay on different things. So the trustees, have always advocated to be the board that we of reason to reach out, to have discussions, and to try to come to a meeting of the minds. So, I mean, I think that anybody in the town wants to reach out to me and have a discussion, I'm willing to able, and if I have to carry it to the town board to get a project done, I will, as I have done it in the past.
You still have time if you want to say something. Okay, rebuttal or answer? Or what would you think the town board should do?
I was gonna jump in. I just wanted to defer to Don if we have any time left. You know, I think it boils down to communication. Okay, they have to communicate. We communicate with them. We have meetings with them on a regular basis. Everybody's got to respect authority and jurisdiction, work together, and we're all good.
The short years I've been a trustee, the town board has been the most helpful, most willing to do anything I ask them or the trustee boards ask them. Yeah, we might ask for a lot of money, we might not get it, but the door is always open. I can go into the supervisor's office almost any time. I can go in Julie Lofsted's office any time. I can go in Stan's office any time. He made me a table, by the way. It came out nice. But you know, the the trustees are very lucky to have a town board which is very willing to communicate and work with them when we ask them to. I can't say more than that, because the previous board was kind of hard sometimes. This board is a dream. Thank you.
Any further comment? We good? Okay. Next question. A tax line indicates a budget plan. What would be the cost categories, and would you need both an operational and capital budget? I'll read it one more time. A tax line indicates a budget plan. What would be the cost categories, and would you need both an operational and capital budget? You guys are up first.
Yes, I do. I believe that. Listening to the trustees, dredging projects, I think those would be great capital projects that you can plan for, that you can spread throughout the town of Southampton, that you can address multiple areas over the course of multiple years, and start bringing to life the plans that have been in motion for years or decades, as you've alluded to. So I think a capital budget would be important in addition to an operations budget. Some of the trustee staff is on loan from the town hall. There's been some turnover in the trustee office. This would allow for dedicated staff as well. They had said about the pump out boats, they're getting 2 new boats. There's an operation budget component to the trustees that a line item on the tax bill would definitely help solidify and hold them accountable, which I think is really important, as they alluded to earlier.
Any other comments?
On a day-to-day basis, we would need an operational budget. On a for long-term projects such as bulkheads and dredging projects, we would definitely need a capital long-term plan. Right now, we do not have the ability to bond. We need to go to the town board, ask them to bond money for us. At that point, we do pay it back. So when we got our tax line, we would not have to ask that. We'd be totally accountable for everything that we do. Now, as far as the pump out boat program, it's a town program. It's a town program that the trustees run. They pay for it. They get the grants and stuff and such. But as far as that question, it's very important that if and when we hopefully do get our tax line, we've initiated working with the comptroller, and we basically will be accountable for everything that we do, all the money that we spend and where it goes.
Comment? Rebuttal? Then before I move on to the last question from the audience, I'm going to say if anyone else has a question, this is the moment to put your hand up and get a card. Okay. Last question from the audience. What would you do to prevent proposed wind farm installations in Shinnecock Bay?
Well, first off, this question is kind of ludicrous, putting it nicely. Just because it's a flyway for migratory species and the plovers and the terns, it would be totally inappropriate to put a wind farm anywhere near that. I did work on a project when I first became a trustee because one of the property owners had a Go Green business, and he wanted to put a wind farm or a wind turbine down at Middle Pond. And working with the Fish and Wildlife and all the other agencies, they would not even fathom it because of the interference with the migratory birds.
Any other comments?
Just real quick, as you know, we have a new bridge, how many years ago, 80 something. You had no idea how that changed the migration of the birds. They didn't know what, they believe it or not, like Ed was saying, they use landmarks to fly. They do. And that bridge messed up so many species, the brant, the broadbill, the canvasbacks, which we hardly see anymore. But I did chuckle, and I'm sorry whoever made that question, but it's silly for a wind farm in Shinnecock or any place. My thoughts.
Ann and I actually discussed this, and we've agreed that we'll both chain ourselves to a buoy and refuse to be removed until they pass on putting the wind farm in Shinnecock Bay. So that's Ann and I has our position.
And I would like to say that I don't think that's likely or possible, but there are wind farms that will be, I think they're scheduled to be 30 miles off the coast, and I'm strongly in favor of those. I have sailed around the 5 wind towers off of Block Island, which are only 3 or 5 miles, and they're magnificent structures, and I think that they are what we need to do to have renewable energy.
I'm going to bring some pipe and plovers out there so they can't come.
All right, then I'm going to give each of you a minute and a half to make a final closing statement, if you'd like. We'll start down with your end, Mr. Glass.
We're full of surprises here this evening. We thought we were going to have 5 minutes to start, and then we thought we were going to have 3, and then we got 2, and now we have a minute to finish up. So I would just like to say that, once again, I think the most important thing for water quality in this town is that we are going to be having hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars available to us, and that where that money is spent, how that money is spent, who spends it, who gets to decide how it's spent, are the most important things that we have coming at us. And if we do it right, we can fix all of our bays, we can fix our ponds, we can fix our lakes. It's possible. We've seen it done in rivers like the Hudson, and it's just a question of money, but it's our money, and somebody needs to look after it.
I just want to thank everybody for being here tonight, and also to you for hosting the debate. I will say, as it's very humbling to be on this side of the table. The depth of knowledge that is evident by the incumbent trustees is stupefying on some level. So it's tricky to be in a debate.
I want to echo also, thank you for coming out. Thank you for having us. Hampton Bays Civic Association, as Maria knows, always has the best cookies. So keep that up. You guys are great. One of the things I learned on the Franca board is that diversity in the board is paramount. We made national news when we elected the first Latina board member. I think that generational differences, gender differences, it increases the knowledge base that you bring to the trustee table. So I am running for trustee, and you're going to find us on row A. So you'll see the little letters on the bottom of your cards. When you're new to politics, you get on the ballot in one spot. So you got to look for us on row A. Our names will all be together, and we hope we have your vote. Thank you.
I want to say thank you for everyone coming. I have to stand up so my sister can see me. She's over in the corner now. Hope we answered some of your questions. Hope we confused a little bit. Just remember, when you vote, it's a very important vote. It's more important than your council, the supervisor, the highway department, because we protect your access to the beaches. We protect your clams, your oysters, your hobby, your paddleboarding, your swimming. All your stuff while you live out here, we protect for you. We need your help. I need your help. You need my help. So just be careful who you vote for. That's what I ask. Who you think will do the job for you. Once again, thank you very much.
I'd like to thank the Hampton Bays Civic for hosting this debate. It's one of the better ones I've ever been to. A lot of good questions, and I want to thank the people in the audience for participating. I know sometimes it can be rather boring sitting out there. Hopefully we livened your night up a little bit. I appreciate, my position as a trustee. This is my 7th time running. I take it very seriously. I try to communicate as well as I can. Maybe not as good as some think, but I can work on that. But going forward, I'm looking to have your support as in the past, because I'm very passionate about the trustees and the water and ensuring that we have, access for the community on the beaches, whether it's 4x4, whether it's walking, swimming, whatever it is that goes on the beach that people enjoy. It's very important to me. It's very important to you. So thank you for your support in the past. and hopefully I get it in the future.
Thanks, Ed. Yes, I definitely do want to say thank you to everybody that came out. I thought it was a great debate. It was a lot of fun and a lot of good questions. I'm going to ask for your support in November. I've put everything that I could into this position in protecting the environment, in protecting your public access, in doing whatever I could to protect your money and advocate and communicate throughout Town Hall to the community, to the public, and beyond. It's a very serious job. I take it very seriously. There's a lot of complex issues. I have tremendous respect for all the trustees that came before this board and got us to where we are today. And I would like to be part of this board to take us into the next generation to make sure that we are strong and in place for our children and their children's children. And I'd like to say thank you very much for this evening, and I would thank you very much for your support in November.
Well, first, I had gone first before, and one of my anxious moments, I did not thank you, and that's what it even says it right here in the card, thank you. But I was ready to jump right in, and so I do thank you for having this debate, and like Scott said, or Ed said, it's one of the better ones. But I also want to allude to something I had said earlier about I'm not on the board, I'm running for trustee, and that sort of kind of maybe meant that I'm blaming him, or something could be blamed. There's no blame how things are from the previous board or any other board. I'm just anxious to get on there and do the work that I know I can do. One of the things Gary alluded to also was the money. Now, that makes me feel pretty good, because if there's money, that means projects can be done. And I'm really anxious to have the experience of the board when I get in. I hope I get in. I hope it's your support of their knowledge, and tell me what to do, and I'll do it. And that's how I feel. So thank you.
Well, as my husband would say, I always have to have the last word. So let me remind you that tomorrow night at 6 p.m. is a very important meeting on the Hills at Town Hall. And Thursday the 28th at 10 a.m., Jay Schneiderman is going to present the budget to the town council. Also, our next meeting, the second half of the debate, is on the 23rd of October, and it's going to start at 6:30, because there's a full roster of candidates, both for town hall and for county legislature and town supervisor of the highway. So we hope to see you there. I'd like to thank all the candidates and all the trustees for coming out tonight and for being so forthcoming, and particularly thank the audience for staying and being interested in what was said. Whatever happens, we need to improve the quality of our water. Thank you.